Thank you again, Mr. Scott, for allowing me to interview. Now, before we get into the questions, can you kind of do a short introduction for my listeners?
Sure. So my name is Tony Scott, and I'm a writer-director. I actually got into this about 10 years ago after I had a career in the high technology world. I was a consultant and venture capital investor in tech companies based out of Silicon Valley, and also spending a lot of time in Tokyo and London and China. And got the writing bug, and actually ended up going back to UCLA to the graduate film school, their professional screenwriting and writing for television programs. And I also studied directing in the UCLA extension courses. A few years ago, after writing a bunch of scripts that won a lot of awards and had several that were optioned, nothing had been produced. So a producer said, "Why don't you just go make a short?" And so it was like, okay, yeah, I guess I could probably do that. So ended up making a short that was called Together. And it was the first narrative film of any type that I'd done. And it was actually basically a portion of effectively of a feature script I'd already written called Higher Love. And that short went on, we filmed it over 2 days and actually got it done on time and, basically at budget, and went on to win a lot of awards. It was selected to screen in 25 film festivals around the world, including 4 that were Academy Award qualifiers. We won out of those 25 film festivals 12 major awards, including multiple Best Film and Best Screenplay awards, as well as awards for Best Actor and Best Actress, and all sorts of other stuff. So it was a nice success, and it's kind of a moving tearjerker kind of a story, romantic drama, if you would, and it served the purpose of showing that, one, that the story was an interesting story, it could be an interesting story for the feature. And secondly, that we could actually take something that was on the page and do something so it would look great on a screen, look cinematic. And so that was because we'd never done any of that before. And so that actually allowed us to then get into both making other shorts for hire and a commercial for hire, and also to attach some great talent for the feature version that we're working on closing distribution and financing on right now. Hopefully we'll go into production, but the second half of this year, I'll be directing and my partner will be one of the producers on it.
Thank you. That's quite a impactful way of going about it, starting from where you started from to where you are now.
Yeah.
Now, with your experience with UCLA, how do you think that has shaped you into the person you are now?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, because you really need to learn the craft of screenwriting. That's one of the things that I really realized by going through this is that great ideas, there are thousands of great ideas, and there are almost no brand new ideas. They're totally unique. So no matter how great you think an idea, a story is, it's about getting it onto the page in a way that fits within a screenplay or television structure that is important. So, and that's craft. That's something you have to train and learn about what the rules are and how to make it work. And there's reasons why there are these various rules. You need to know what the rules are before you start breaking them. And I think that was really good, great experience for me. And I would encourage anyone who wants to try to do screenwriting, or to, especially if they want to ultimately become a director, take courses, because you will learn. And it's a lot better to learn in a sort of safe environment like that, where people are going to be very critical of you, but they're going to be critical to try to help you improve your craft and ultimately the story, as opposed to just going off and doing it yourself. People think, oh, I've got a great story, and they go do it. Probably not the best idea.
Now, with just the execution part of things, when it comes to your creative process, how do you go about writing and directing films?
Yeah. So for me, first I have to have some idea of a story, or find a story that I really love. And a lot of the stories that I do are ones that are either based on real stories or at least inspired by real stories. And so then I say, okay, what is the gist of the story that I'm trying to get out? What's the actual theme I'm trying to focus on in the story, in telling the story? How do I want to move people? Whether I want them to laugh or cry or whatever it is, they need to be moved. And so then once I have that, I start thinking about sort of an overall arc of the story. What's the beginning? What's the end? And in particular, if you've got a great beginning and a great ending, then you can figure out the rest of it in between, because once you know where you start from and where you're going to end up, then you can figure out how to get to there. Then I'm a big believer in outlining. This is something they really taught us at UCLA. It's really super important to have a very, very solid outline before you start writing. I mean, you can write something about your characters if you want, do some deep character biographies. I kind of try to think about that. Who is this person, each of these characters that I'm writing about? What is it that's motivating them? What are their goals? And what are their flaws? So each character should have some goals and strengths and flaws. And what's their personality like? And so I tend to model characters after people that I know, or people that I've met in my life, or people that I've seen, and maybe create something that's around them. But it's a lot easier if you have something in mind when you're writing something in terms of who that person is, then you know how they're going to respond to any kind of a situation that you may put them in. So once I have the first bits of the outline, at first it's maybe just, okay, here's a couple of paragraphs of what the story overall is. Then I'm trying to break it into 3 acts, if it's a feature. What are the big things that are happening in Act 1, Act 2, Act 3? And then it's going into a scene by scene outline. So I will actually write down, here's fade in, scene 1, exterior, wherever it is, establishing shot of this, then it's what's happening in that scene, and go through scene by scene, just as I was writing it in a script format, but without all the dialogue. And sometimes I'll have some dialogue ideas about how the character is going to be interacting, and I'm using that also as a placeholder to basically, as I'm going in to start writing actual scenes and dialogue. And I do that actually now in a screenwriting program. So I use Final Draft, but whatever screenwriting program you might use, it will all work. So then when I put that in there, after I got the outline really nailed down, and I've gone through it with my partner, Gene Sue, who's my producer on most of my projects, and also with other people that I trust, does this make sense? Then and only then do I start writing scenes. So because the story has to work within that outline first.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, that outline might be 5 to 12 pages worth of scene by scene, changes. And then when I've got it in that same screenwriting program, then I can go and start working on whatever scene I want to, and start working on it. I usually try to work on the first scenes and the last scenes, because again, I want people to think about a story, to get excited in the beginning and to remember something at the end. So that's sort of how I do it.
Now, what genre is your cup of tea that you like to gravitate towards?
So I'm less genre specific, as more I'm character driven. So all the stories that I do tend to be very character driven stories. It's about the uniqueness of a character that is put into an unusual situation, and they have to figure out a way to overcome that. So that doesn't matter whether it's something in the future or in the past. It doesn't matter if it's comedy or drama, because all great comedy comes from some dramatic element that is sort of set up, right? So I'm probably more on the dramatic side than compared to, say, slapstick comedy or physical farce kind of comedies. I've written action scripts that people seem to really like. I've written pure romantic drama scripts, and I've written comedic scripts. Again, all of them have to come from some point of view. Who is this character? And one of the things that my partner Gene Sue and I like to say is we want to do stories that are about real heroes, not superheroes. So real people put into some unusual circumstance, and that they have to do something out of their norm to be able to make whatever they want to make happen. And that could be on a battlefield. It could be in a kindergarten. It doesn't matter. It's about doing something that is unusual and unexpected, that they're forced to step up to do something, inspirational.
Now, with your extensive background, what has been, from this point and looking backwards, has been your proudest moment?
Well, I think actually the proudest moment so far has been the creation of Together, that short film I mentioned before. I mean, we won so many awards as a first-time filmmaker. I mean, first-time filmmaking crew, frankly, for some, director, writer, first-time producer. And we really moved people. I mean, that story, when you see it happens to feature an African American lead family, and one of the first places we ever screened was the Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival. And when we screened it, I'm looking over across the aisle, and there are these two big, strong Black guys, who were probably middle age, and they were crying in public. Okay, so when you get somebody, a big, strong Black guy, to cry in public because they're moved, you've hit some chords that are proper. And that was really moving for me. And the fact that so many people then, after every one of these screenings, came up and said, wow, this is something just sort of like what happened in my own life or my own family, because it's a universal story. It's not a story about the Black experience or the white experience. It's about human experience. And it just happens that family that is experiencing it is an upper middle class Black family. That's all. So because it fits what the long-term story is, the overall. Mm-hmm. So that's really good. And people were complimenting us on the cinematography, about the performances we got out of the actors. And I can't take a lot of credit for that. I work with actors in the way of saying, okay, here's the story. Here's who I see your character is. You have to obviously create this character yourself and be able to bring that to life. And let's talk about how you see your character in these scenes. If you have any questions, let's talk about it. And then I let the actors go do their things. You hire great actors and let them do their thing, you're going to get great performances out of them. And then it's about making sure you make the right choices in the edit to, pick the best pieces of performances and how they can how you can put those together in a great way. The post-production sound is very, very important. That's one of the big things I learned in this process is, guys, don't skimp on sound. Make sure you have great production sound. Don't think you can go back and fix it all by ADRing it afterwards. That's a horrible thing to do. Just don't do it. If you have to, it's fine, but don't rely on that. So, and that's one of the things that will really turn people off really fast is you can't understand what's going on the screen. I'm not Chris Nolan, so I can't make a movie like that where people can understand what people are saying. So it's very important for all of us to remember that if people see something on screen, they can actually, I think, let certain things go in terms of the perfection of the visual if they are hearing the sound really well. And if the sound fits and if the music that's supporting it fits and is evoking certain feelings. But if you have bad production sound, it sounds tinny. That sounds like an amateur production. And so people don't like that. They turn off no matter how great it is on. Again, unless you're Chris Nolan. But.
And that's kind of one thing that I've recently discovered. And that's essentially what led me to buying a mic, is because of how great the quality is once you get one and invest in that.
Yep. And people don't realize that. I mean, I was a musician when I was younger, professionally in high school and college. And so to me, sound is super important, both in terms of just the dialogue sound, but also the sound of whatever it is that I want to try to help evoke in the scene from the music, which is why I work very, very closely with the composer I've been working with on my projects. And we have a shortcut of communication because he also is a sort of a jazz guy, but classic, also more of a jazz guy. So when I say, okay, when I see this scene, I hear sort of like Duke Ellington Meditations, which is a pretty famous piece. It was Nora Jones basically actually sort of copied and put words to. And it's great. It's a very effective moving sound. It's very simple that goes with that. So he can then go off and create something that worked really, really super well with that. And, we've been nominated for Best Composer by a couple of film festivals. So having that working relationship is one of the things I really love. And that's went across every single one of the sort of department heads that I had. So what I took from my business background, I have a BA from the Kellogg School at Northwestern, and was in business for a long, long time before I moved into the entertainment world. And one of the things I learned in Silicon Valley is the most important thing you can do is bet on an A+ team. Better to have an A+ team with a B- technology than an A+ technology and a B- team. So get a great team that you can trust, work with them over and over again, and hire the best people you can for each of those different roles in the production, because we're like a little company. Each production is like a little company, like a startup
Mhm.
company. So hire the best people you can, trust them, and make sure that they know that they have the right to stop you if you're going off the rails. And one of the things I loved about all of this process was actually learning from each of these production department heads. I sat in on all of the post-production sound work, and also with the colorist. And so I'm learning what they do as we're doing it. So, and they tended to like it because a lot of times people aren't asking them questions. They're either just telling them to do something or just leaving them on their own. And to me, I'm like actually fascinated. How do you do this? How do you make it better? And so each time I learn something, I'm thrilled, and I'm thrilled that they've done such a great job in helping to teach me.
Now, it's actually a very interesting component of creating music, creating film. I mean, and it kind of goes along with what I've been recently discovering is when you're collaborating with certain individuals, it's very important to have the A plus type of personalities.
Yeah, and people that are willing to go the extra mile and to help you understand why they're doing something one way versus the other. And it's really important to ask questions. Look, nobody knows everything about everything. There's no way that somebody can come in onto a set and know everything. It's impossible, especially if you're new to this. I mean, you don't even know what you don't know. So what
Mhm.
I'm trying to do is learn what I don't know, so I can actually at least ask the question, say, okay, I need to let them take care of this. But unfortunately, in the film business, I think for so long, the whole concept of the auteur as director is is gone way too far, honestly. Yeah, there are some who are auteurs. So the director of Roma, okay, great. You write it, you direct it, you operate the camera, great. You're an auteur. But most other people are not, and you're not really the author of a film. The film is made up of the performances and the input from hundreds of people, and every one of those people is really important to it. Even down to the craft services person, because if you don't have food where it needs to be on the right time, you're going to have some unhappy campers, and that's not a good thing at all. So you got to make sure that all of those things are there. My job, hopefully as a director, is just to make sure that we're getting the right people that actually can take whatever it is in my head and on the page and help me get it even better out to onto the ultimately onto the screen.
Which is why, like every role, no matter who it is, I mean, even PAs, for example, are so crucial for any film.
Absolutely.
Now, for aspiring writers, directors, and individuals such as myself who are trying to break into this industry, what type of advice and recommendations would you have for someone such as myself?
Yeah, so first of all, try to learn as much as possible. And I think that probably in almost every college across the United States, there are, screenwriting or, writing courses or film courses. Learn as much as you can. If you can take courses, and there are courses you can do online, remotely, which are great too. I mean, you don't have to necessarily be in a classroom to do a lot of this stuff, especially for writing projects. I mean, I've had classes where I had people from all over the world. I had someone who was in Singapore, another person that was in London, another person that was from West Africa, and then people that were a bunch of people from the United States, all over the United States, in a couple of classes. And it works just fine. And it's actually good because you're getting different kinds of inputs, not the same sort of point of view as everybody else has, which is one of the big problems with a lot of film school programs is that usually the classes are with people that are fairly young. They're maybe a year either in college or just a few years out of college. It's graduate film school. And usually all those people know is what they've seen on TV or in movies.
Mhm.
So, you see a lot of very derivative kind of thoughts on things in terms of ideas for projects and concepts, not only just of the projects, but of, how things are done that just aren't realistic in the world. I mean, look, people don't be afraid of having life experience. Life experience is very valuable because I can guarantee you that the projects that I write about Silicon Valley are much more realistic about what Silicon Valley is really like even though it's like on extreme pieces of Silicon Valley, than anything that anybody's ever watched on TV or on in the movies about Silicon Valley. But that's just me,
Hmm.
and so everybody has different experiences that they can bring to things. And if you don't know about something, do research, ask people who actually know something about this. You'd be surprised how much people actually were very willing to talk to people about whatever it is that they're an expert on. And so make sure you get those kinds of details correct. Like one of the things that's a pet peeve of mine is when I'm watching a show, whether it's a movie or a TV show, and it's set in a certain time frame, and the music that they use is music cues, and a lot of times it maybe even just needle drops, not actually created music,
Hmm.
are wrong because they like. As I remember one that I think it was in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, the beginning of the second season, the family goes to Paris and it's like supposed to be 1960 or 1961, and they got Louis Armstrong singing What a Wonderful World. Now that song didn't come out until 1968 or 69. And I happen to know that pretty well because I am from New Orleans originally in Mississippi. And so I'm a big fan of Louis Armstrong.
Hmm.
So, but to me, it was a little jarring. Or if I hear language in a show like the most recent the television version of A League of Their Own that
Hmm.
was in the 40s, and you have people that are supposed to be in the 40s using anachronistic dialogue or phrases that just would not have happened. And they did a lot of things right with that show, but that was one of the things that I thought was they could have done better. So I think as a writer, it's really important to get those details right because no matter it's not just about how great the story is. It's not like you have to make everything historically perfectly accurate
Hmm.
because, as Mark Twain famously said, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But at the same time, you need to make sure it feels like it's proper to the time frame, so that doesn't pull people out of the story.
Right, especially those that follow along, let's say, the history of music or the history of that time frame. It kind of is like, wait a second, that didn't happen until this point in time.
Yeah, it's like if all of a sudden jet fighters show up in a World War II movie. No, it's like it might make a good story. I think they actually did one where the Philadelphia experiment, where they actually had some nuclear aircraft carrier get caught in a time warp. We go back to World War II. Okay, that's an interesting concept as a whole high concept,
Hmm.
but you can't do that and use that in a show that is about or a story that's about that specific time frame.
Right. Now, kind of going back in what you've been doing and what you're currently doing, what are some big projects for you?
So the projects coming up, that the first one is that we're working right now on closing distribution and finalizing financing on is the feature version of the short film together. It's called Higher Love, and based on the success of the short and the script, we've been able to attach Danny Glover and Jane Seymour and Tom Berenger in leading roles in that project. And we're in discussions right now with distributors and financiers about that, and I hope to actually have that go into production the second half of this year. So that right now is my number one focus. Before the writer's strike happened,
Hmm.
we have a TV 1 hour TV drama set in Silicon Valley. It's a female-led drama, and it's a interesting show. It's showing the part of Silicon Valley that people don't normally see. It's not just filled with a bunch of bro coders that are dumb jerks that are sitting around, doofuses like that you see in Silicon Valley, the TV show, which is funny. And that's very true. That's a very true part of it too. But there's also this whole other side of people who are extreme sports enthusiasts who live their life on the edge. They're adrenaline junkies, basically, in life and work and everything. And so, I wanted to show sort of that aspect of Silicon Valley because people don't know it and don't expect it.
Hmm.
And so that one, we were just starting to go into some of the major streamers, and the strike happened. So most likely that's going to be, put on the way back burner for until the strike is settled. And then I've got another feature film that we're currently talking to people about. It's called Sentience, which was something I wrote a few years ago and won the best script at UCLA in the professional screenwriting program. at the time, and then was optioned, and then they sat on it for a long time, because that's what happens when people option your material. A lot of times things just sit on it. And then we finally got the rights back. And as it turns out, it's about a artificially intelligent smart house. And that, basically with the rise of Chat GPT and other generative AI, it actually now all of a sudden is al Quran. It was, a little bit visionary a few years ago, but now it's okay. This is pretty much what's happening now, more or less. And so it's just taking another few steps forward from that. But no sexy robots. It's not Ex Machina with beautiful robots running around. It's more like HAL from 2001, the disconnected computer voice that helps control everything in the house. So it's a kind of an interesting story, and it can be done on a reasonable budget, because it's not about some wild, far out future, science fiction story. It's about right now, maybe 15 minutes in the future. So everything looks the same, and it's a contained project that's got a cast of basically 4 characters. And so it's definitely very doable on a budget, and one of those that would probably work well, both for streamers and or for theatrical release. So working on that one too. And again, so that script is fully written, fully developed. I think that we could probably get by the strictures that the WGA has, especially if we're not working with a non-WGA signatory production. So there you go.
Now, for you, what type of legacy do you hope to leave behind once you have produced all these films, especially the ones that you just talked about?
So I hope it's that we're able to create content that entertains and inspires. Like I said, the story is about real heroes, not superheroes. People that actually do things that inspire other people to do better themselves. As an example, I love the movie Hidden Figures.
Mm-hmm.
Here are people that had everything against them, and they had to rise up to become amazing and do amazing things in the face of that. And they didn't let those roadblocks and obstacles in front of them stop them. They figured out how to get around them, or just went right through them, or went over them. And that's important, because I think in the human condition, that's what we really want to see, or hear about stories that allow people to be heroic, whether they're in small ways or big ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big fan of movies that inspire. I'm not a fan of horror movies where anyone can die at any time for no particular reason, and there's no hope for redemption for anyone. That's not my thing. Dark crime stories, not my thing. It's just anything that really glorifies violence in that way is not my thing. But things where we have people that are doing things that, in spite of the odds against them, that's inspiring to me. Show me stories about people that are not thought of as being, that they should be doing something because of their gender or their ethnicity or whatever, and that they make things happen. Okay, that means if they could do it, why couldn't I do it?
Right. Now, for you in particular, what aspect of that kind of resonates with yourself? Is it more of like you being a business person and then becoming an individual in the entertainment industry, or how does that resonate with the individual that you always been?
Well, it's the business person I've always been. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Mississippi, and I was sort of the outlier there in a lot of ways. I was also really sick for a lot of my childhood, missing half of the school year almost every year. So I was definitely an outsider looking in at a very well established but very insular society. And so I was always, inspired by people that were able to overcome really difficult things. And Mississippi at that time was not an easy place for people who were Black or for women. And so I was very inspired by those people in my own life who I saw as being, really heroes every day, going through the little indignities that they had to suffer and the big indignities as well. And that is, I said, wow, that's inspiring to always continue to lead a great life and be one being positive
Mm-hmm.
and helpful. world of others. That was important to me. Um, so that's why I guess why I'm attracted to those kinds of stories, because I love the underdog story.
It's definitely one that catches a lot of people at like the heartstrings, and one that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah. I mean,
Now,
so I really hope that anything that I do is something that people can relate to across cultures, across ethnicity, across the globe.
now that's definitely important, especially for me, because I resonate in some capacity to that. I have a learning disability. I've had it where I wasn't sure of how to interact with individuals, and
Mhm.
now I've had it where I can now do things like this and other activities that I haven't in the past.
That's great. So it's because you have overcome something. Just, I totally get it. I mean, I
Mhm.
was dyslexic and it was not easy for me to overcome that. And it's still, God forbid, ask me to remember a sequence of numbers that is like more than six numbers. I'm going to get two of the numbers reversed for sure. And the, it's one of those things where each of us has our own things we have to overcome. A lot of times they may not be obvious. I mean,
Mhm.
if someone's physically disabled, that's an obvious thing they have to overcome. But if someone has a, learning disability or an emotional issue
Mhm.
or something that you just don't know. And so none of us know what other people are having to deal with in their lives unless we hear their story.
Right.
And, and so I think that it's important to hear other people's stories so we can all be more empathetic.
It's what makes us human, whole, and connects us.
Yeah.
Now,
So
the last question that I have for you is, for the next year and a half outside of your projects, what personal stuff are you working on?
personal stuff, I'm
Yes.
working on getting better at tennis because I'm not a great tennis player. I like tennis, but I'm old and slow. So I have to figure out how to be more wily and crafty against the people that are faster than me. Uh, but I love tennis, so I would like to get better at that. Um, that's probably the biggest outside thing
Mhm.
I'm working on in terms of something. And I think it's important to keep physically active and it definitely helps us. And I hate to exercise. So by playing tennis, I'm getting exercise and not even thinking about the fact that I'm getting exercise. Right. So, um, otherwise, I do enjoy the creativity that comes from cooking, uh,
Mhm.
doing really interesting cooking and to trying all sorts of new cuisines and new chefs. I mean, it's a big part of my life. Unfortunately, a little bit too big for certain parts of my body. But food and wine is something I always am focused on in terms of trying and new things and doing new things. And I'm hoping to get back to Japan, where I've been over 50 times for
Oh, wow.
10 days each time, sometime within the next year, and go explore other parts of Japan I haven't already, to go enjoy food and cuisine and the culture that's there. It's a place I really love.
A fascinating thing to leave on is I'm part Okinawan. So
Oh,
that's an island. I don't know
yeah.
if you're, so you
I've
are
not been to
aware.
Okinawa yet, but yeah, I like Okinawan food, and I do like also Okinawan slap key guitar. How about that?
So it's a very interesting place. I've been once in 2012, which of course is quite a bit of time ago. But I've enjoyed my minutes there and hours there. And it's
Yeah,
quite a different culture. And in that time, you can experience a lot of different things that make you a completely different individual.
absolutely. Yeah. No, and that's the thing. I encourage everyone to explore other cultures
Hmm.
in whatever way they can. And if that means going to, a restaurant, for example, if you can't afford to get on a plane to go to Japan, learn about Japanese cuisine, learn about why that's important in their culture and what the
Hmm.
significance of these things are. You might find you get interested all of a sudden in Japanese origami or block printing art or whatever it is. You keep on going down in these rabbit holes down these different things that strike your interest. And as a writer or director, a creator of projects, you will find some way to incorporate some of that perhaps into one of your stories.
Hmm.
Create a whole story around it, which is fine. And I think that that's important to be able to always take a look at things from the perspective of, how is this viewed in this other culture, this other place?
Hmm.
How does an outsider also view that and figure out what's going on with that? That leads to interesting stories, at least in my opinion.
Now, for those that are interested in your previous projects and works of art, how can they look at that stuff or view the material?
I can send you links.
Hmm.
I'd be happy to have your audience take a look at, and so you can leave those up for both the dramatic short together, and also I was hired to do another short for a dramatic actress who wanted to try her hand at comic or comedic kind of things. So we created a more like a sketch comedy short for her, and that's also won a bunch of awards. And it's very equal opportunity offender
Hmm.
kind of a parody short. So and those are fun. I wanted to do something very different from this super dramatic tearjerker kind of a project I did before to show, can I actually, get comic, action out of people, and
Hmm.
do I understand how to cut and pick the choices where you can actually create the comedy. The timing is very important, obviously, on that. So yeah, so I can say that's called representation matters with a question mark at the end.
Hmm.
It's kind of a poking fun at the whole representation uh, bandwagon that so many people have jumped onto, and for good reason. And I'm a big fan of that, but a lot of people don't really understand what that means, and
Hmm.
and that was the really point of that short. So yeah, I'd be happy to send those to you, and you can include them,
Thank you.
and we can go from there.
Sounds good.